He said she was like a daughter. That's what he told everyone, smiling, gentle, believable. But that afternoon, when I came home early and saw how he looked at her, it wasn't fatherly. It wasn't innocent. It was the kind of look that ruins everything you thought was safe. The air felt heavy, like the truth had been sitting in that house long before I walked in. And for the first time, I realized love can rot quietly and still smile at dinner. The wind had that slow Texas stillness that makes every sound louder. The cicadas, the creak of the porch swing, even the hum of my own breath. I wasn't supposed to be home that early. The doctor canceled my appointment last minute, and I remember thinking it would be nice to surprise him, to bring lunch, maybe sit together before he left for his meeting. I parked under the oak tree, the same one we planted when we moved here 9 years ago. It used to make me smile. That day, it didn't. The house looked too calm. Curtains swayed lazily in the open window, and through the shimmer of daylight, I saw movement, quick, familiar. The front door was half open. I heard laughter. His laughter. I froze, one foot still on the welcome mat. He said something I couldn't catch, soft and low. Then another sound, hers, a giggle I'd only heard in brief moments before. My niece, Emma. 19, studying at the community college nearby. She'd been living with us for a few months since her dorm flooded. I loved that girl like my own. Her toothbrush sat beside mine, her sneakers by the door. And then I saw it. Through the reflection of the glass cabinet near the hallway, I saw his hand brush her hair back, slow, tender, practiced. I didn't breathe. I couldn't. My lunch bag slipped from my hand, hitting the tile with a dull thud. He turned. For a second, his eyes met mine, not guilty, not startled. Just caught. The kind of stillness that knows there's no way to explain what's already spoken through a look. I wanted to scream, but no sound came. My fingers covered my mouth before I realized it, like my body was trying to keep the truth from escaping too soon. She turned, her smile fading as quickly as it had appeared. She whispered his name, like maybe if she said it softly enough, it would sound different than what it meant. He stepped forward, saying my name in that calm tone he always used when he wanted control. It's not what you think, he started, but his voice broke halfway through. I stared at him. At her. At the space between them that used to be mine. The clock ticked. The sun through the window painted gold across their faces, perfect lighting for a lie. I didn't cry. Not yet. I just turned around and walked back out into the sunlight. My heart felt too loud in my chest. From behind me, his voice followed. Please, don't do this. You're overreacting. But the wind swallowed his words. Outside, everything looked the same, the sky, the trees, the yard we built together. But I knew something irreversible had happened in that stillness. When I finally looked back at the door, it was closed. Locked from the inside. And that's when I realized the worst kind of betrayal isn't loud, it's quiet. It's polite. It waits for you to come home early. I didn't drive far. Just down the road to the edge of town, where the fields start to thin and the horizon looks like a place that could hold your pain for a while. I parked near the old bridge, left the engine running, and watched the steering wheel shake under my hands. I'd always believed betrayal would sound like shouting, like slammed doors and shattered glass. But it didn't. It sounded like silence. A silence that rang louder than any scream I could have made. I sat there until the heat inside the car felt unbearable. Then I turned off the engine and listened. The world outside was still spinning, trucks passing on the highway, a dog barking somewhere in the distance. My life hadn't ended, but it felt like it had quietly folded in on itself. When I finally drove back, the sun had dipped lower, painting long shadows across the porch. I didn't go inside right away. I stood there staring at the window where I'd seen them. It looked innocent now, lace curtains fluttering softly as if mocking me. Inside, the jazz music from his favorite playlist played low, like nothing had happened. I opened the door. The smell of coffee and cologne hit me, familiar, nauseating. The lunch bag I dropped earlier was still on the floor, the sandwiches crushed, a small trail of mustard leaking onto the tile. I stepped over it carefully. The living room looked untouched, almost too neat. A folded blanket on the couch, a half-burned candle, 2 mugs on the table. His book lay open, spine broken at the middle. But there was something else. A hair tie. Pink. Not mine. I picked it up slowly, rolling it between my fingers like evidence from a crime scene. Then I heard footsteps upstairs, light, quick. Hers. She was packing, I realized. Leaving before I could make her face what she'd done. Emma? My voice barely made a sound. There was a pause. Then the sound of a drawer shutting. She didn't answer. When she finally came down the stairs, she couldn't look at me. Her eyes were red, her hands shaking. I'm sorry, she whispered. For what? I asked quietly. For him. Or for me. She opened her mouth, but no words came. Just tears, the kind that look heavy, not because of guilt, but because of shame. I didn't mean for it to happen, she said finally. He said he was lonely. I thought. I laughed softly, not out of humor but disbelief. Lonely? The word tasted like rust. You thought that justified it? She stepped closer, but I raised my hand. Don't. Just don't. Behind her, the hallway clock ticked. I could see the faint outline of her suitcase at the door. She was already gone, just hadn't walked out yet. When she did, she turned once more, like maybe she wanted me to say something that would absolve her. But I didn't. I couldn't. There are things silence says louder than forgiveness ever could. I stood there for a long time after she left, staring at the empty space she'd occupied. Then I looked at the framed photo on the wall, the 3 of us at last Thanksgiving, smiling, her head on my shoulder, his arm around my waist. It felt like a stranger's memory now. The house, once warm, now hummed with a kind of cold I couldn't name. And somewhere between the ticking clock and the fading sunlight, I realized something. Secrets don't destroy a home overnight. They live in it quietly, until the walls start to whisper. That night, the house didn't feel like mine anymore. Every room seemed to echo their voices, faint, invisible fingerprints pressed into the air. I tried to busy myself, scrubbing the counter, folding the same towel 3 times, but the quiet only grew louder. When his car pulled into the driveway, my heart didn't race. It slowed. The sound of the tires on gravel used to make me smile. Tonight, it made my stomach tighten. He came in without knocking, as if nothing had changed. His tie was loose, hair messy from the wind, eyes searching for something he hadn't yet realized was gone. Clara, he said softly, like my name was an apology. I didn't answer. I just turned off the faucet and let the dripping water fill the silence between us. He took a step forward. She told you. It wasn't a question. Just a statement of fact. I turned to face him, leaning against the counter, my hands still wet. She didn't have to, I said. I saw. He froze. The words hung in the air like smoke. Clara, please, he said, voice trembling now. It wasn't, it got complicated. I laughed, the kind of laugh that doesn't sound like laughter. Complicated? She's 19, Mark. 19. He winced at the number, as if hearing it out loud finally made him realize how far he'd fallen. He tried to reach for me, but I stepped back. I didn't mean for it to happen, he said. It was just, she reminded me of. Don't, I interrupted. Don't say me. He stopped. The truth between us was raw and ugly now, stripped of all its excuses. Do you know what the worst part is? I asked quietly. It's not that you betrayed me. It's that you taught me how calm betrayal can sound. He rubbed his forehead, pacing like a man searching for a version of events that could still make him the hero. I messed up. I know that. But we can fix this. I can fix this. I tilted my head. You think loyalty is a leaky pipe you can patch up with promises? He sighed. Clara, I love you. I've always loved you. Then why was I the only one who didn't know it was over? The clock ticked again, a steady, cruel rhythm. Outside, a storm was building. I could see flashes of lightning crawl across the horizon through the kitchen window. He sat down at the table, his hands shaking slightly. Please, just listen. I wanted to. God, I wanted to believe him. But every time I looked at him, I saw the reflection of his hands on her back. That image had carved itself into me like a scar that would never fade. I can't listen, I said finally. Not tonight. Not when everything still smells like her perfume. His face crumpled. What do you want me to do? I picked up the pink hair tie from the counter and placed it gently in front of him. Start by not pretending you don't know who this belongs to. For a long moment, he just stared at it. Then he whispered, I'm sorry. But sorry was too small for the space it needed to fill. When he finally left, the storm broke, rain hammering against the windows like it had been waiting for my permission. I stood there for a while, watching the streetlights blur through the glass. Somewhere between thunder and silence, I whispered to myself, love doesn't end with betrayal. It ends when the truth finally speaks louder than the excuses. And that night, the truth finally had a voice. The next morning, the house smelled like rain and regret. The storm had passed, but everything still felt soaked, the air heavy, the curtains damp, my heart swollen with the weight of silence. Mark had left early, the sound of his car fading before the coffee finished brewing. I sat alone at the kitchen table, tracing circles on the mug with my finger, thinking about every lie disguised as a gentle smile. There's a special kind of ache that comes after betrayal, not the loud, crying kind. It's quieter. Like bruises under skin that never show. I wanted to distract myself, so I started cleaning, the way people do when they're trying not to remember. I opened drawers, straightened picture frames, folded dish towels that didn't need folding. And that's when I saw it. A letter. It was tucked behind the cookbook I hadn't used in months, sealed in a pale blue envelope, my name written on it in his handwriting, the kind that used to make grocery lists look like love notes. For a moment, I thought maybe it was what I'd always wanted, an apology, written carefully in ink instead of air. But when I opened it, the first line wasn't for me. It began, "You make me feel young again." The rest blurred for a second. My eyes refused to stay still long enough to read the sentences that followed. But when I did, I wished I hadn't. He'd written about her, the way she laughed, the way she reminded him of a life he'd forgotten. Words that sounded tender, almost poetic. Words I used to hear once. He'd even signed it, yours, M. Not love, Mark. Just an initial. Intimate in its secrecy. I set the paper down and stared at the window. Outside, the neighbors' wind chimes swayed gently, their songs sweet and mocking. The world didn't pause for heartbreak. It just kept humming. For a long time, I didn't cry. I folded the letter neatly, slid it back into its envelope, and placed it where I found it. Then I wiped the counter, as if that could clean what I'd just read. But then I noticed something strange. The envelope wasn't new. It had a faint coffee ring on one corner and the date, 2 weeks before our anniversary. He had written this while I was buying decorations for our dinner. While I was choosing the blue table runner because he said it reminded him of peace. I sank onto the floor. Not because I was weak, but because the truth had weight, and that morning, it finally sat down beside me. My phone buzzed. It was my sister, a text, casual, harmless, coming by later? Mom wants to see you. I stared at her name, the irony slicing deeper with every second. I hadn't told anyone. Not yet. I typed, sure, see you soon, and hit send. My hands were trembling. Before I left, I placed the letter on his side of the bed. Not as an accusation. As an offering. Proof that I'd seen everything. Proof that the silence was over. As I walked out, I caught my reflection in the hallway mirror, tired eyes, steady jaw, the faintest hint of something new behind the grief. Not anger. Clarity. The kind that comes when a woman realizes she's not the victim of the story anymore, she's the author. By the time I reached my mother's house that afternoon, the sky had turned the color of pewter. The air felt thick, that still, uneasy calm before a storm that knows exactly where to strike. My sister's car was already parked in the driveway. The same silver sedan she'd driven since college. The same one I'd helped her pay for when she couldn't afford the down payment. The sight of it used to make me proud. That day, it just made me feel hollow. Mom opened the door before I could knock. Her eyes searched mine for something she didn't want to find. "Sweetheart," she said softly, stepping aside. "You look pale." I wanted to say I'm fine. I wanted to lie the way women do when the truth feels too heavy to hold. But I just smiled, kissed her cheek, and whispered, "Long week." In the kitchen, my sister sat at the counter, scrolling through her phone, humming to herself. She looked up when I walked in, bright smile, easy voice. "Hey, you." Finally decided to show up. Her laugh, the same laugh that used to make everyone feel at ease, now grated against something inside me. I saw flashes of her hand on his arm, the way he'd leaned close at dinner, their shared glance that lingered half a second too long. Back then, I told myself I imagined it. That's the cruelty of denial, it always dresses up as grace. Mom busied herself making tea, her silver hair catching the dim light. She asked questions about work, about plans for the weekend, about nothing that mattered. My sister talked easily, her tone bright, her eyes never quite meeting mine. At one point, she reached over, touched my hand, and said, "You look tired. Everything okay, at home?" It took everything in me not to pull away. Her concern felt rehearsed, hollow, like a line from a play she didn't believe in anymore. "Yeah," I said quietly. "Just finding out what love really looks like." She tilted her head, puzzled for half a second. Then she smiled again, that smile that never reached her eyes. "You'll figure it out. You always do." I wanted to scream. I wanted to throw the letter at her feet and ask her why she thought I wouldn't see it, why she believed I'd stay quiet forever. Instead, I took a sip of tea that tasted like ashes and said, "Mom, do you ever think people confuse kindness with weakness?" Mom paused mid-stir. The spoon clinked against the cup. She looked at me carefully, her voice even. "All the time. But the smart ones learn the difference." The air in the kitchen shifted. My sister glanced between us, a small crack in her composure flickering like static. "Anyway," she said, forcing a laugh. "I should get going. Big day tomorrow." She leaned in to hug me. Her perfume, sweet, too sweet, it filled my lungs. For a moment, her voice brushed my ear. "You know I love you, right?" And that's when it happened, that tiny, involuntary tremor in her tone. Guilt. Fear. Something unguarded. I pulled back just enough to see her eyes. They were wide, glassy, searching mine for forgiveness that hadn't even been asked for yet. "I know," I said softly. "But love looks different now." Her face faltered, only for a second. Then she left, the front door shutting like punctuation. Mom stood at the sink, quiet, the kettle hissing low. "You saw it, didn't you?" she finally asked. I nodded. "I did." She turned, eyes heavy with something like sorrow, but also respect. "Then take your time, sweetheart," she said. "Truth has a way of coming home on its own." I couldn't shake her eyes from my mind. The way they darted when she said she loved me, not the wide-eyed sincerity of truth, but the trembling flicker of someone rehearsing affection. Guilt doesn't always confess in words, sometimes it leaks through pupils, in the way someone avoids the light. That night, I sat in the living room with only the table lamp on. The house was too quiet, like even the walls were holding their breath. The clock ticked steadily, marking time I didn't want to count anymore. Mark hadn't come home yet. He'd texted an hour earlier, late meeting. Don't wait up. The same lie, polished with routine. I looked around the room, the space we'd built together. The couch still carried his shape from every lazy Sunday. The photo on the mantel, the one of him with my sister and me at last year's barbecue, smiled back like a cruel joke. His arm around my waist, her head tilted toward him, all three of us frozen in a lie. I turned the frame face down. The sound of it against the wood felt final. I told myself I wasn't going to cry anymore, but tears don't ask for permission. They just arrive, quietly, stubbornly, like old memories knocking on a locked door. Then, headlights swept across the window. His car. I wiped my face and stood, my heartbeat quickening. I didn't plan to confront him. Not yet. I just wanted to see him, to look at him and know for sure. Because no matter how careful a liar becomes, the eyes never lie. He came in softly, like a man trying not to wake a ghost. Jacket slung over one arm, tie loose, the faint smell of perfume that wasn't mine trailing behind him. He didn't notice me right away. "Mark," I said. He froze, keys halfway to the counter. "Hey," he said after a beat, that familiar easy tone. "You're still up?" "Yeah," I said, my voice steady. "You're late." He smiled, small, calculated. "You know how these things go. Client dinners, last-minute meetings." His eyes didn't meet mine. "What color was her dress?" I asked suddenly. His hand stopped mid-motion. "What?" "The client. What color was her dress?" He frowned, confused. "Why would that matter?" "It doesn't," I said, stepping closer. "Unless you can't remember which woman you were looking at tonight." He blinked, a flicker, just a flash, and there it was. That moment when the truth flinches before the mouth can lie. "I don't know what you're implying," he said softly, but the rhythm of his voice faltered. I studied his face, every line, every movement. His eyes didn't hold mine for more than 2 seconds. The man who once couldn't stop looking at me now couldn't bear to. "You said she was like a daughter," I whispered. He looked up then, startled. The pupils tightened, the breath caught, and in that silence, I saw everything. The guilt. The fear. The admission without words. For a second, I thought he might speak. But instead, he just said, "You're tired. You're imagining things." It would have been easier to scream, to throw something, to demand honesty. But I didn't. I just nodded. "Maybe I am." He seemed relieved, stupidly so. He kissed my forehead, I felt nothing, and went upstairs. I stood in the living room, watching his shadow climb the stairs like a stranger trespassing in my house. My reflection in the dark window stared back, a calm, composed, terrifyingly quiet. That's the moment I realized something had changed. The love had died long before the truth arrived. And now, I wasn't waiting for confession. I was waiting for proof. The next day began like any other lie, ordinary, quiet, pretending to be harmless. Mark kissed my cheek before leaving, the same ritual kiss he gave every morning. But his lips felt colder now, the kind that said routine, not affection. I watched from the window as his car disappeared down the street, my hand resting on the curtain like I could hold the world still for one more second. The house was silent again, just me, the ticking clock, and the echo of all the things he didn't say. I wasn't planning to become a detective. I just needed to stop feeling crazy. That's the thing about betrayal, it's not the act that kills you first, it's the not knowing. The confusion eats you alive. By noon, I'd brewed another pot of coffee and opened his laptop. I'd never done it before, never even thought to. But trust had already been buried, and all I was doing now was digging for its grave. He'd left his email open. It was almost too easy. The first few messages were boring work schedules, newsletters, receipts. Then, halfway down the page, I saw her name. Subject, Tuesday feels too far. I clicked. My breath froze. The email was short, no more than a few sentences, but it was enough. I miss the way you laugh before you say my name. I keep replaying last night, the way your hand brushed mine. You said it was wrong, but it didn't feel that way. Don't let her see what we are, not yet. No signature. No name. But I didn't need one. My hands shook. I scrolled down, more emails, months old, hidden between grocery lists and bank updates. The language got bolder, their codes more confident. One message said, "She's going to notice soon. We need to be careful." Another, "You looked at me differently last night." It scared me, but I liked it. And then the last one, the one that burned. "You promised you'd tell her after the holidays. Don't make me wait." My throat tightened. That was 2 months ago. 2 months of dinners, 2 months of laughter, 2 months of me sleeping beside a stranger. I shut the laptop, my hands trembling. The room felt too small, the air too thin. I walked outside, barefoot on the porch, needing space, any space that wasn't built on lies. The wind carried the smell of rain again, the same kind that had lingered the morning after I found the letter. The clouds rolled low, dark and swollen, as if the sky itself had heard too much. I sat on the steps and let the world move around me. A child's bike wheel spun in a neighbor's yard. Somewhere, a dog barked. Everything ordinary, indifferent, cruelly normal. Inside, the laptop waited. Proof. Digital, undeniable, irreversible. But I didn't print it. I didn't take pictures. I didn't forward it to anyone. Instead, I opened the browser and pressed delete. Not because I forgave him. But because I didn't need to keep the evidence to know the truth. It wasn't about winning anymore. It was about freeing myself from the noise. The silence that followed was almost sacred. The kind that comes after confession, even if it wasn't mine. When the screen went black, I caught my reflection faintly in it. My eyes didn't look sad anymore. Just awake. That's when my phone buzzed again, a text from my sister. "Coming by tomorrow? I have something to tell you." I stared at the message for a long time, the wind tugging at my hair. My thumb hovered over the screen, but I didn't reply. For the first time, I wasn't the one waiting for the truth. It was waiting for me. Morning came gray and weightless, the kind of morning that doesn't care what you lost the night before. I hadn't slept. I kept hearing the wind against the windows, like the world was whispering what I already knew but couldn't say out loud. By the time I poured my coffee, my phone was already blinking, a message from her, "I'm stopping by. Need to talk. Please." For a moment, I just stared at it. 3 words that had never frightened me before, need to talk. They used to mean sisterhood, shared secrets, late-night laughter over wine. Now they felt like a storm warning. I didn't reply. I didn't have to. I already knew she'd come whether I wanted her to or not. That was her way, all charm and momentum, too sure of forgiveness to believe she'd ever run out of it. At 11 sharp, her car pulled into the driveway. The sound of her heels on the porch was familiar, haunting. I watched her through the curtain, the pastel sweater, the careful makeup, the face that still looked like family. When I opened the door, she smiled, tentative. "Hey." "Hey," I said. We stood there for a second, suspended in something that wasn't quite warmth, but wasn't hatred either, just a fragile thread of shared history stretched thin. She glanced past me into the house. "Can I come in?" I stepped aside. She walked in slowly, her perfume filling the space, the same scent I'd smelled on Mark's jacket 2 nights ago. The realization hit me like static, quiet and electric. She sat on the couch, hands folded, eyes darting to the floor. "I've been meaning to tell you something," she began, voice trembling around the edges. "It's complicated." I said nothing. Silence has a way of stripping people bare. Finally, she looked up. It wasn't supposed to happen. I swear. He was just so kind to me when I was falling apart, and I thought. Her voice cracked. I waited. I thought it didn't mean anything at first, she continued. But then it did. And I hated myself for it. Her words fell into the room like small stones, each one breaking something invisible. He said he was unhappy, she whispered. That you didn't see him anymore. I should have stopped it. I should have been stronger. I stood still, my heartbeat steady, almost eerily calm. You should have been my sister, I said softly. She broke then. Her shoulders shook, tears streaking down the foundation she'd so carefully applied. I know. I know. I didn't know how to stop wanting him. The words were cruel in their honesty. But I respected that finally, truth without costume. I knelt slightly, enough to meet her eyes. Did he love you? She hesitated, then shook her head. No. I don't think he loves anyone. He just hates being alone. That, somehow, was the saddest thing of all. We sat there for a long time, no shouting, no slaps, no cinematic betrayal. Just two women, connected by blood and broken by the same man's attention. When she finally stood to leave, she turned at the door. Can you ever forgive me? I thought of the letter. The emails. The smell of her perfume on his skin. I will, I said quietly. But not today. She nodded, eyes lowered, and walked out. The sound of her car fading down the street felt like a sigh leaving the house. When I closed the door, the silence wasn't empty anymore. It was full of decisions waiting to be made. And somewhere deep down, I felt it, the faint, thrilling pulse of freedom beginning to rise under the ache. Evening came dressed in gold and ash, the kind of light that softens everything except memory. By then, I had replayed her confession a dozen times, each version quieter, colder, more certain. I didn't cry. I didn't even curse. I just waited, because I wanted to see the truth wear his face. Mark came home later than usual, his tie loosened, the faint scent of cologne still clinging to his shirt. He smiled when he saw me in the kitchen, that polite, automatic smile of a man who thinks the storm has already passed. Hey, babe, he said casually, tossing his keys on the counter. You look tired. Long day? I watched the way his fingers brushed the keys. Steady. Controlled. The kind of movement that always used to calm me, now it just made me wonder how many times he'd practiced lies in that same rhythm. Not long, I replied. Just, revealing. He frowned slightly, pulling open the fridge. Revealing? I leaned against the counter. Yeah. Your niece came over. The fridge door froze midair. The smallest pause, a blink too long, a breath too shallow. It was almost beautiful, watching realization crawl across his face. He turned, forcing a laugh. Oh. What for? To talk. I let the words hang between us, heavy and sharp. About you. The silence that followed was delicate, deliberate. You could almost hear the air learning how to behave differently. He closed the fridge, leaned on the counter opposite me, and tried to smile again. She's upset, Clara. You know how dramatic she can be. Right, I said softly. And you? What are you? He exhaled, a quiet sigh that gave away more than any confession could. Then he met my eyes. Clara, whatever she told you, it's not what you think. The line every guilty person rehearses like a prayer. But I was past thinking. I was observing now, like a scientist studying something that once mattered but now just needed to be documented. I reached behind me and slid my phone across the counter. The video was already open, a quiet still frame from the security camera I'd installed near the side patio last month. He looked down at it. The image was unmistakable. His hand on her face. Her smile. His voice, faint but clear, no one has to know. For a long time, he didn't move. Then he whispered, "You recorded me." "No," I said, my voice level. "You recorded yourself." He rubbed his forehead, pacing now. "It's not what it looks like." "It's exactly what it looks like," I interrupted, still calm. "That's the problem." He stopped pacing and stared at me, really stared, like he was seeing someone new. Maybe he was. "Clara, we can fix this," he said finally. "I made a mistake, No, Mark," I said softly, stepping closer. "You made a choice." His face tightened, something dark flickering behind his eyes. "You'd throw away everything over one mistake?" "I didn't throw it away," I said. "You did." "I'm just picking up what's left." For a moment, he said nothing. Then his voice dropped low, almost pleading. "You still love me, don't you?" I looked at him, this man I'd once built my world around. And for the first time, I didn't feel anger or sorrow. Just distance. "I did," I whispered. "But I think love needs truth to breathe." He didn't follow when I walked past him. He didn't say my name. He just stood there, surrounded by the quiet proof of his own undoing. The morning after felt unreal, too bright, too still. The sunlight came in clean and sharp through the kitchen window, glinting off the glass of water I hadn't touched all night. The house smelled faintly of his cologne, like guilt pretending to be normal. Mark was still asleep upstairs. I could hear the low hum of his snore, a sound I'd once found comforting, now just proof that remorse never kept him awake. I sat at the dining table with a pen and a blank sheet of paper in front of me. I didn't plan to write a letter, I wanted to write closure. Something simple, something that didn't beg or bleed. At first, the words wouldn't come. But then they did, steady, unflinching, and honest. "Mark. You told me she was like a daughter to you. Maybe that's what made it easier to cross the line, easier to believe I wouldn't notice. You underestimated me. You always did. I won't scream. I won't tell anyone. You've already done the loudest thing a person can do, you broke the quiet that trust lives in. By the time you read this, I'll be gone. The house, the furniture, the silence, you can keep all of it. It already sounds like you. Don't try to find me. Not because I'm hiding, but because you already lost me. Clara." When I folded the paper, my hands didn't shake. The fear, the ache, even the anger, it had all burned clean. All that was left was a strange kind of peace. I placed the letter in the center of the table, weighed it down with his favorite coffee mug, the one that read, "Best husband ever." The irony didn't sting anymore. It just felt finished. Before leaving, I walked into the nursery. The morning light filtered through the soft blue curtains, and the crib sat there like a confession waiting to be spoken. I touched the edge of the baby blanket, the one my mother had knitted, and whispered, "You deserve a mother who sleeps without fear." Then I turned to leave. Downstairs, the clock ticked louder than it ever had. I slipped on my jacket, grabbed the car keys, and opened the door. The air outside was cold, forgiving. The neighborhood looked untouched, the same lawns, the same mailboxes, the same silence pretending not to notice what happens behind closed doors. I sat in the car for a moment, hands on the steering wheel, eyes on the rearview mirror. The front door stayed closed. No footsteps. No apology. I thought about everything that had happened, the lies, the recording, the night before. And then I realized something that almost made me laugh. I didn't need revenge. I just needed to leave him alone with himself. That was punishment enough. The engine started softly, the way new beginnings often do. As I drove away, I glanced once more at the house, not because I'd miss it, but because I wanted to remember what my life used to look like before I learned what it meant to stand up in silence. And as the sun rose higher, I rolled down the window and breathed. For the first time in months, the air didn't feel heavy. It felt like freedom. I didn't drive far, just until the houses began to fade into open road and the morning light spilled wider across the sky. The radio played something soft, one of those old songs that fill silence without asking questions. For the first time in months, I didn't turn it off. There's something about leaving quietly that people never understand. They think strength is in slamming doors, in shouting, in being seen. But real strength, the kind that saves your sanity, happens in silence, when you walk away before someone has the chance to break you twice. By the time I reached the gas station on the highway, the air had warmed. I parked beside the pump, stepped out, and just stood there for a moment, feeling the world move around me. Trucks rumbled by. The sky smelled like asphalt and sunlight. I wasn't running anymore. I was just gone. In the passenger seat, my phone buzzed. It was a message from an unknown number. But I didn't need to read it to know who it was from. Mark. For a second, my heart did what hearts do, it betrayed me. It ached. It wanted to know if he was sorry, if he finally understood what he'd done. But then I looked at my reflection in the window, the woman staring back at me, tired, strong, alive, and I turned the screen face down. Some things don't deserve an answer. I kept driving. The road narrowed into 2 lanes, bordered by tall pines and golden fields. Somewhere between the turns, I began to breathe differently, slower, deeper, freer. I didn't know where I was going yet, but for once, that didn't scare me. I stopped at a small diner just outside of town, the kind that still served pancakes on chipped plates and coffee that tasted like burnt hope. The waitress called me a sweetheart. I smiled, said thank you, and meant it. That's how healing starts, in the small, ordinary kindness of strangers. When I reached into my bag for my wallet, I found something I didn't remember packing, a photo. It was from our wedding day. He looked at me like I was the only thing that had ever mattered. I almost put it away, but then I noticed something else, the way I was looking back. I wasn't naive or blinded by love. I was hopeful. Pure. And I realized something powerful in that moment. She, the woman in the picture, she didn't die in the betrayal. She just got buried under it for a while. I folded the photo neatly, placed it beside my coffee, and whispered, "You made it." The rest of the day passed in fragments, sunlight shifting through the car window, songs I didn't skip anymore, the hum of wind that no longer sounded lonely. When dusk came, I pulled over by a lake, quiet, wide, and still. The water reflected the sky like it had secrets of its own. I sat on the hood of the car and watched the sunset burn into the horizon. Orange to gold. Gold to blue. Blue to something that looked like peace. That's when I took out my phone again, opened the camera, and snapped a photo, not of me, not of him, just the view. I captioned it with one line. Sometimes leaving isn't losing. It's remembering who you were before you forgot. Then I put the phone away. No posts. No announcements. Just truth, quiet and clean. As the first stars appeared, I thought of what my mother used to say, forgiveness isn't about them. It's how you take back your name from the silence. I smiled. She was right. I started the engine again, the headlights stretching down the empty road. Somewhere out there was the version of me who still believed in love, not the fragile kind that asks to be proven, but the kind that simply exists, whole and unafraid. I was ready to meet her again. And as I drove into the night, one thought stayed with me, soft, certain, and final. He'll wake up to an empty house. But I woke up to my life.